Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends. Episode 95 of the BJJ Brick Podcast. I'm Gary, and I'm here as always with my partner in crime, Byron. How are you today, Byron?
Gary, I am doing great. I had a good time rolling this morning. We've got an exciting episode with David Meyer. He's one of the original Dirty Dozen, so I'm doing great, Gary. How about yourself?
Always doing great. Got to roll a little bit this morning, and now I get to record, so what else can I ask for? Good day.
Yep, Gary snuck in there this morning. He had a busy day scheduled, but he was able to get in there and make it happen.
Yeah, I had to leave a little early, but I still got 45 minutes of rolling in, so that's why I got a smile on my face. Can't complain.
I can't complain about that either. And we're sitting down here. My schedule's getting a little bit different, and we're going to record a few episodes today. So,
yeah, Byron's getting ready to go on vacation, and I just got back from vacation, so it's kind of a little hectic.
So we are committed to giving everybody a show every week. So we're gonna try to get a few shows done here in one day, and should be fun. And who knows? By the end of the recording here, we might be a little bit more loopy than usual. I don't know. More
gassed out a little bit, I guess you could call it. But we're really always appreciate anybody listening to our show, and definitely if you want to support the show. We do have an audiobook for sale. Byron's recorded an audiobook. It's just like the show. It's 2.5 hours of Byron talking, guiding you through, and the audiobook's called Your First Year in BJJ. So Byron's going to take you through kind of what you're going to encounter your first year and how to get past those roadblocks and how to make the most out of your first year, which is going to set you up for a good second, third, fourth, and 25th year. So it's only $11.99, and we put a link to it on our show notes. So definitely check it out. It's getting very good reviews.
Yep, it is a great way to support the podcast. If you want to get the BJJ Break Podcast sent to your email every week, we could do that for you as well. And that is, how you do that is just go to the website or Facebook page. There's a little spot where you enter in your name and email address. And every Tuesday, you will get an email with basically all the show notes and a link to go download or listen to the podcast. At the very bottom of the email, you're going to see a link to a Dropbox folder. If you want a little bit more jiu-jitsu stuff and action of all different varieties, click on that box. You'll open up a folder with several audio files. I think there's about 10 of them in there. I've got an audio file called Tilt, How to Make Your BJJ Game More Balanced. It's a little audiobook I made a little while ago. It's in there for free. It's just about 15, 20 minutes long. But it was just a little something. There's also a couple chapters from the audiobook Gary just mentioned about your first year in BJJ are in there for a sample.
Yeah, so you can check it out. Try it before you buy it. How's that sound?
That sounds good. It sounds like we're getting a little bit more scammy. But we've heard nothing but good reviews. That. No, that's good. I mean, if you're a little questionable, definitely download those and check them out. And it's just a way that helps support the podcast. And then the email list is just a way to help us get the message out there. We trust me, I'm not going to sell your name to anybody. There's only it's not that many names on the list anyway, so not really an option.
And if you listen to the show every week and you really think the show helps you out, tell your training partners, tell your buddies about it. Best way to get more people to listen to it is word of mouth. If you tell your training partner, they're more apt to listen to it than us, trying to twist somebody's arm. So, we always appreciate more listeners. I think in turn it leads to a better show. So, definitely let everybody know about us if you really enjoy your show.
Yep, it's a big honor when somebody recommends us, and you could also do that online and we'll see it there, but just face to face is nice as well. Gary, it's time for our quote of the week here. We're going to do a little bit of a throwback.
I always like throwbacks.
How far should we throw it back, you think?
I'd go back to something. I've always been one of the biggest Ryan Hall fans. I think we should go back to Ryan Hall. I know that was one of our earlier episodes, but I think that'd be awesome.
All right, this episode, it was a little while ago, but you could find it online. Wherever you listen to this podcast, it should be around. But this is Ryan Hall with our quote of the week. Here we go.
Excellence is not an act, but a habit. We are what we repeatedly do. It's an Aristotle quote, reminding us that you're not in a state of excellence or a state of anything. You are ultimately what you do. I am not what I think or what I say. I'm the actions that I perform. And if I want to have a high level of anything, it takes constant practice. It takes whatever else. But a lot of times we think of ourselves as like, oh, so-and-so is good, so-and-so is not good, or so-and-so is the best or smart or whatever. Ultimately, in my experience, the people that are the most successful are the people that, over the long haul, are the people that simply focus on, again, what they can do, and they form good habits for success, and they work hard, and they control those habits. And again, the chips will fall where they will, but recognizing that someone telling me I'm good means nothing. All I need to do is do things that contribute to a positive outcome, and ultimately I will become that outcome.
That was our friend Ryan Hall, giving us our quote from Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit.
And, it's so true. We can talk and say we do this, but our actions speak louder than words. Like, you think about what everybody always talks about in jiu-jitsu or MMA. Everybody talks about it. It's a new thing, and everybody wears the shirts, but you've actually got to get out there and do it. You can talk about it. So many people talk about it, but people don't really do it. You've got to get out there and do it. And to get better at something, you can't just think about it. You can't just read it from a book. You have to get out there. You have to train. You have to drill. You have to blood, sweat, and tear to get to that point.
Yeah, and if to me, some of this quote does say, like, if you're shortcutting something in your game, it's going to show up in what you're actually doing when you try to do it correctly. So if Gary Kimura's me, and I don't defend the Kimura all that well sometimes, so he's taking some shortcuts and he's not maybe preventing the guard pass so well one day or whatever, and he gets away with it. That's fine when he does it with me, but when he's against somebody else, he's repeatedly done this. Just maybe a lazier way, that person could capitalize on what Gary's been repeatedly doing. Repeatedly, that sounds weird. So to me, it kind of speaks to drilling and to doing things properly every time and working for perfection on every rep and not just, you are what you're going to do over and over again. If you practice for perfection, you'll get it, or you'll get darn close to it.
I like what you said a minute ago there. You were talking about, try to get perfection on every rep. And I love that you said that. I hear so many people talk about, hey, you need to do 100, arm bars from the guard. And I'll see somebody throwing up some crappy arm bar from the guard just to get them done. I like what you said. When you're drilling, use great technique. It may take you a little bit longer, but it's going to pay dividends. Like you said, there's no shortcuts. You need to do every little step, and that muscle memory is going to get there, and you're going to be doing that move incredibly after all that practice, and with no hitches.
I agree, Gary. There's something to be gained by doing something, even though it's like just for the cardio aspect of it. But you have to be very careful that you're not just getting an ab workout and throwing up 100 arm bars. If you're getting, you want to get the benefit of doing a good arm bar each time. So, you are what you repeatedly do. If you throw up 100 crappy arm bars, you're 101 when you're rolling. It's probably also going to be kind of crappy.
Well, we appreciate that great quote from Ryan Hall. But as that music is telling us, it's time for the article of the week. And this week we have a good one here. It's at breakingmuscle.com. It's by Valerie Worthington. I think we've probably used some of her stuff before. Sounds definitely familiar. But this article is 4 ways submission grapplers can apply wrestling concepts to their practice. So basically we're going to talk about getting a little bit of that wrestling intensity and takedowns into jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. There's a lot of benefits for doing wrestling before with jiu-jitsu or before, like if you've done it in the past. But we'll cover 4 of them here, Gary. That's a good plan.
And the cool thing is Valerie speaks with The Rock, Dave Jacobs. I think everybody's heard of him. He's just an incredible jiu-jitsu guy. And Brendan Reedy. They're both Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts and high school and Division I collegiate wrestlers. So she's not just stating her own opinion, which is she's probably got great opinions, and I know she's a jiu-jitsu person, so she knows what she's talking about. But she's going to experts themselves, so we've got some good information here.
Gary, it's like the difference between when we just talk about jiu-jitsu and then when we bring in a guest who's very smart. You go to the source, and it's a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, definitely you want the source. But benefit number 1 of this article is strategic use of power and intensity. And you think about the difference a lot of people will say between wrestlers and jiu-jitsu guys. Wrestlers come at you. They come at you like you stole their lunch money, that you cussed at their mom. Wrestlers are tough. They're aggressive. And jiu-jitsu, we kind of have people think we're not as aggressive. And me, myself, I'm not a very aggressive jiu-jitsu player. I'm more a little laid back. But that strategic use of power and intensity, man, it's not just to get you in great shape, but, man, you use that to your advantage. There's a really focus on strength and conditioning to get you to that part. And, they're talking about even if you're just training to have fun, because a lot of people say, I don't want to use that power intensity to have fun. It's there for you. You can use it to make your jiu-jitsu better. You may not use that power intensity every time when you're training, but, turn it up sometimes. Focus on daily victories. If you're going to get somebody who's just incredible, let's say one day you get tapped out 10 times. The next day you have that small gain. You only tapped out 9 times. So, focus on that, strategically use that power and intensity that wrestling brings.
I would say if jiu-jitsu practice looked more like wrestling practice, you would roll for a little while and then run some sprints and then roll some more. Like, it's just... We don't focus on that sort of thing in jiu-jitsu a lot of times.
The one thing I noticed in wrestling practice is it's not as much rolling. It's more kind of like Tim Sled was talking about. It's a ton of drilling positions. You may start with a head on the inside single. The guy's going to whiz or kick his legs out, and then you just rinse and repeat. And but boy, is it intense. There's that whistle blows, and you switch that next partner, and you better be there and ready to start going in 10 seconds, or otherwise you're doing burpees or running. Yeah.
Going to benefit 2, enhancement of the familiar. So you'll be more familiar with just the grappling sports. Definitely more familiar with the stand-up game as far as working a takedown from standing. It's not really seen to start, wrestling from your knees. You're not going to both start on your knees and work from there. There's different positions you start from in wrestling, but a lot more takedowns emphasis with the wrestling. That's obvious, and that will help you just become more comfortable. And you can see that with somebody with just a little bit of wrestling training is a lot of times a lot more comfortable than somebody who's been training jiu-jitsu for even a little while. They really haven't got that familiarity with the stand-up part of the game. And they also mentioned that wrestlers, they know the rules, like all of the rules, and they know them well. And their coaches know them. And part of the problem with jiu-jitsu is that there's different rule formats still, and we're trying to figure out what's the best thing for jiu-jitsu and what do we want to do. And there's like a standard set of rules with IBJJF, but there's a lot of other rules that are coming out, and some of those are better and some of those are worse. But we're trying to figure out the best set of rules. But it's confusing for the grapplers to go out there and 1 week there are these rules, another week we're in Abu Dhabi, and then we're doing these, and so just they study those rules and they know them, and that's a big deal for competitions, is to know your rules and to really take that away from wrestling. They know what's going on. They know what's going to get them 2 points exactly. They're not questioning that the day before the tournament or their match. How many is the takedown worth?
That is true, and as fast as some of those scrambles happen, you need to know the rules and points inside and out, because stuff's going to happen very quickly, and you want to make sure you get it all. But that's a great point. Benefit number 3, takedowns. They're more than just takedowns. How's that sound? That's awesome. But you think about it. Most jiu-jitsu guys, I don't know if I can say most, but a lot of us have a hole in our game of takedowns, and they talk about how in wrestling, nobody in jiu-jitsu, you may have a guard puller or a certain type of person, but in wrestling, they're saying no one is not a takedown person. even a rudimentary understanding of takedowns could spell the difference between a win. How many times have you seen a match decided by a takedown? That's the first part of it. But then they talk about a lot of times people are afraid to drill takedowns, do takedowns, because they talk about, we don't want to get hurt. They're dangerous. I might hurt my knees. And Dave and Brendan talk about, hey, do you really want to, you're trusting your training partner to do a Kimura, which is probably just as dangerous, if not more dangerous. So, if you're trusting him to drill a Kimura safely, don't you think he can do a takedown safely? And then he goes and talks about, kids tournaments. Kids tournaments, a lot of times they won't allow certain moves, but they always allow takedowns. Takedowns definitely can be safe. No issue about that. Next, Dave and Brendan talk about the person saying, hey, I'm never going to compete. I don't need to work on takedowns. But you think about it, drilling takedowns isn't just about unbalancing someone. It's also about increasing your body awareness. You learn to fall safely. It's going to enhance your technical and strategic knowledge. It's definitely something, if you want to be a good jiu-jitsu guy and get better, even if you're not going to compete, you need to. Takedowns are going to help you so much. You think about a sweep. A sweep's basically a takedown from the ground. You're unbalancing the guy, you're posting, you're blocking something to get to sweep. So you definitely need to work them. And finally, basically, like he says, if you don't learn takedowns, you're not going to go to grappling jail. But you are going to shortchange yourself in knowledge. And we're here for knowledge. We're here to be better. We want to be a complete grappler. So definitely work your takedowns. You're not going to get hurt. Hopefully you won't get hurt. But it's definitely good to try them.
It does say that takedowns can be exhausting. And so that's one reason why I think people just avoid them, is because it's, 3 or 4 minutes of takedowns is like 3 or 4 rolls if you're good at rolling, it can be tough
it's like
on you.
Doing burpees nonstop.
Yeah, but your body will adapt, and you'll get to be able to calm yourself and to work on your takedowns and be more confident and be able to kind of pace yourself with that. And it shouldn't be as exhausting, but it is hard work though. It's like a scramble sometimes.
Yep.
Benefit number 4: tournament preparation and recovery. And we've talked about this a little bit before, Gary, that wrestlers do have a pretty good advantage when it comes to amount of times they've competed over the course of like a high school career. That's a ton of competition. So if, let's say you're a high school student, you're loving jiu-jitsu, it's great, and wrestling season's coming up. Should you do wrestling season? Well, that's up to you and maybe your parents or whoever that helps you make these sort of decisions, maybe your coach. But the benefits of it, if you want to compete, in a few months' time, you're going to have a ton of matches. You're not going to have to worry about transportation. The school should handle that. And you'll get skilled opponents every time. So that's a huge benefit. Even in MMA, a wrestler going into competition has faced somebody, across the, faced off with somebody and wrestled them and hundreds of times, versus the guy who's had like a couple jiu-jitsu tournaments and just stepping in and they still have the butterflies about, I'm competing, people are watching me. Well, the wrestlers used to that. They've done that a million times.
Yeah, they've done it a million times.
So that's a huge advantage right there. And also with the wrestling, it gets more of the article. It talks about being prepared, knowing about your body and how you're going to peak at a certain time, what you're going to do the week up to the tournament, like how you're going to be, you don't want to be, training super hard the night before. That's not going to probably be the best thing for you. But maybe, if it is, you'd learn that about yourself. But just kind of get ready and go through those tournaments and figure out how your system works and what works with you.
Yep, and I like how he said, he talks about seasons too. There's really no jiu-jitsu season. It's year-round, where wrestling, you do have a main season, even though now there's, Greco and freestyle, during the off-season. But peak season training does not consist of hours of grinding. They're short. They're short. But they go hard. They bring that intensity. But it's because you're going every day. Your body's grinding. You need time to recover.
That was a good article there by Valerie Worthington on BreakingMuscle.com. 4 ways submission grapplers can apply wrestling concepts to their practice. And I guess it's just the concepts. You don't have to actually have wrestled to apply these concepts. Apply these concepts and ideas.
Yep.
That's Valerie Worthington. She's been doing jiu-jitsu since 1998, so she's got us beat, Gary.
Awesome. Yep.
So that's cool, and we always enjoy her articles. That's on BreakingMuscle.com. Good thing next week we got another person from BreakingMuscle.com.
Actually, the next 2 weeks, Byron.
Yep. We'll have Sam Spiegelman doing some Q&A about strength and conditioning, but we'll get back to that later. Now we've got some business to handle before that.
I think it's time for the interview of the week with David Meyer, one of the original Dirty Dozen.
Here we go. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
He taught Tyler Durden how to make soap just because they had extra supplies. He once got a mat burn. It ended up causing a 3-alarm fire. When he pulls guard, the ref gives him 2 points. If you watch his competition footage, you will see Mr. Miyagi looking at him with approval.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay listening, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring one of the first American black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the BJJ Break podcast. We have David Meyer today. David, thanks for jumping on the podcast with me.
Hey there, Byron. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
All right, we've got a lot to talk about. So let's just get a little quick introduction of you, a little bit of early story about starting Jiu-Jitsu at such an early time, and a little bit about what you're doing today.
So I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu back in, I think it was around 1991. So that's been quite a long time. I've been doing martial arts my whole life. I've been doing jiu-jitsu my whole life. It's funny how since the advent of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, we've come up with this term Japanese jiu-jitsu, and it sort of refers to everything that's not Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But jiu-jitsu is originally a Japanese martial art with lots of different styles, and I was doing one of those styles. Wasn't particularly formal, but I've been doing it or Japanese, but I've been doing it since I was a kid, and then I've done various other martial arts as well, and I was actually teaching jiu-jitsu. When I first heard of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, someone walked into my class and showed me a videotape of the Gracie brothers. It was called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action. It was this great videotape showing a lot of their fights in Brazil, and no one in the U.S. had really ever heard of them, and I thought it was interesting, but just looking at the videotape, I couldn't really perceive how great they were and BJJ was. I just saw that these guys doing jiu-jitsu were good fighters and they were beating other people. And I thought, okay, cool, well, they're good fighters. But then I had a couple of people wander into my class who had done a little bit of training with Rickson Gracie. It was Rickson and Horian in Southern California. It was long before the first UFC. Again, no one really knew who they were. And the Gracies had just come. It was first, Horian and sort of then bringing his brothers, to come and teach and to make a name for themselves. By the way, if you hear some ringing in the background, that's a wind chime. I'm here at my house and it's getting windy, so forgive me for that. But they had a challenge. They were making a name for themselves by having this they called the Gracie Challenge, and the offer was $100,000 cash to anybody who could beat them. And it was getting a lot of attention, and a lot of guys were coming out of the woodwork and fighting them, and of course losing. And I didn't really like that. So I had heard about the Gracie Challenge, and I thought, I'm not really into that kind of a challenge thing. So I never went and really introduced myself at that time. But what happened is then I had a guy came into my class and said he'd been training with Rickson and wanted to train with me. He wasn't really challenging me, but he wanted to check me out. And we grappled, and I beat him, but he was really good. I really had a hard time. Eventually choked him out and asked him how long he'd been training, and he said 6 months. And I had been training my whole life. And so that was like, really? And so I knew something weird was going on. And then one of my former students came back to me and said, hey, he met this guy Higan Machado, who is cousin to the Gracies and who's who's the current champion of the family, undefeated from Brazil, but also is not really into the whole Gracie Challenge thing. And he's just a really super nice guy. and he's amazing. And I grappled that student and had the same experience. So I knew there was something crazy going on with these guys, and I had to meet them. So I went down one night to one of the first schools that the Machado brothers had, and it happened to be a very rainy night, and they weren't able to come and teach class. So they had one of their purple belts teaching. It was a guy named John Will, who was Higan Machado's first student, American student when he first came here. Actually, an Australian student. John Will came from Australia. It's another interesting story, to do an interview with Hori and ended up meeting Higan. But he, by that time, was a purple belt, so he taught the class. And I thought, oh, there's some non-Brazilian guy teaching this. He's a purple belt. I'm a black belt. I'll just take my belt off, put on a white belt, and tell him that, and I'll be cool. And he thought that was really nice. And then after class, he made me tap about 50 times. And I thought, whoa, if this is a purple belt, what are the black belts like? And of course, the next day I came back, and Higan was there, and he played with me like a baby. I mean, both hands tied behind his back. I couldn't do a thing. I just was so enamored with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and with Higan that I went back to my class. Remember, I was a black belt teaching. And I said, guys, I found a new style of Jiu-Jitsu. It just concentrates on the ground. But it's so fun and it's so interesting, and these guys are so good. I'm closing my class. And basically, over a period of weeks, I closed the class, took off my black belt, put on a white belt, became best friends with that Australian guy, John Will, and started training under Higan. And then at that time, it was Higan and Jean-Jacques Machado, and very soon thereafter, Jean-Jacques came, and Carlos, and all of their 5 Machado brothers. It's all part of the same Gracie family. Their mother is Gracie. And then, of course, I eventually met, Hickson and Hori and the rest of them. But I began training under the Machados at that time. And so I had a head start, of course, because I had a whole lifetime of jiu-jitsu. But honestly, that got me to maybe be able to be competitive with an average blue belt. That was the level I started with all my years of jiu-jitsu training in BJJ. I was could hang with an average blue belt, couldn't touch the good blue belts. And my goal was at the time to be the best American in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I never achieved that because there were some guys, like a guy named Bob Bass and some other guys on our team who were already ahead of me who I never caught. But, I was good, and I trained 5-6 days a week with the brothers and at both schools they had at the time, and was present at the first ever jiu-jitsu competitions that were held, Brazilian jiu-jitsu competitions that were held in the United States, and also went and did some judo competitions with the Machado brothers. You can find that on YouTube and stuff, and it's been a great experience, and I've watched as Brazilian jiu-jitsu has grown. I've watched as it's changed, and I can tell you about some of those changes I'm seeing, how competitions have now grown, world championship competitions and things like that, and MMA. It's all been very interesting to watch and be a part of. Wow,
sounds like a amazing experience and time and the art to start and then to see all these changes come through. Before we get too deep into what's going on now in Jiu-Jitsu, tell us a little bit about what you do off the mat.
Off the mat, well, okay, so I'll tell you two answers to that question. One is what I do off the mat that I do to support me on the mat, and also is what's my life around. So I'll tell you my life. My life is I'm a very passionate animal lover, always have been, and I founded and run a nonprofit organization that is the world's largest nonprofit pet adoption website. So for homeless pets that are in shelters, dogs, cats, rabbits, or whatever, it's called adoptapet.com, and your listeners can go check it out. It's nonprofit, even though it's a .com, supported by corporate sponsors that want to advertise, so it's really good. We're bringing money into the game. We're helping hundreds of thousands of animals. Millions of people use it every month, and that's great. But I'm also just a big animal lover beyond the dogs and cats. I've been a vegetarian since 1985 and a vegan since almost as long, and that stems from my desire to not harm animals if I don't have to. But what I've learned for me is it's also a good decision for my health and for my athletic performance, and that's something that everyone needs to sort of experiment with on their own. But what I've found is that not having foods that I can eat and digest quickly, I have no problem getting enough protein or anything like that. Meat is kind of heavy, and dairy kind of builds up some congestion. A lot of the fighters I work with experience that when they drop dairy, they can breathe a lot better. And I just feel like that's been a really important thing for my still training all these 25 years. I'm 52 years old. I still compete internationally. I train with guys, Olympic wrestlers, guys half my size. And I can just keep going. And I think part of that has been my diet. So I'm a big, advocate of that. I actually created a website called fuelforthefighter.com, which I believe is still up there. And it's got some good information for people that just want to check that out. Nothing preachy at all, but just sort of the justification of why I think from a health and athletic point of view, it makes sense to eat less meat, basically, and animal products. But so I'm a big animal lover, and I joke my job is kicking ass and saving animals. So the kicking ass part is my martial arts instruction. So at various times I've traveled and taught. I never opened my own school because I always wanted the ability to just train for fun. But it's always been my sort of credo that you may beat me on the mat, but you won't beat me with something I've never seen, because I travel and I will train with anybody at any time. Judo people, Sambo people, BJJ people, wrestlers, MMA, all of it, to keep myself just as up to date and fresh as possible on fighting. And I produced a curriculum with that Australian friend of mine, John Will, who was the first Australian black belt in BJJ, and it's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu curriculum for martial arts schools that don't have access to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor but just want to do some basic grappling. And that's in play, that's in use in thousands of schools. We created the curriculum, John and I, for Chuck Norris and his whole karate association, a BJJ introductory grappling curriculum that they use. The whole way that the Machados got connected up with Chuck Norris, which is an interesting little historical fact. Chuck was really instrumental in helping the Machados out when he got here, and that was through a fantastic Australian fighter named Richard Norton, who connected them up with Chuck Norris. He's an actor, and that's how John Will met them and got involved. And so it's real interesting how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu sort of came and got its foothold in the United States. But in any case, I travel and teach seminars. I don't do that as much, but I've done that a lot. And I used to do that to supplement my income, but now I'm just too busy on the animal stuff. So for me right now, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a fun thing I do. I train in a number of different schools. I still compete at the largest, world championship competitions and stuff when my work permits me to get out and do that. And that's my life off the mat. Now, in terms of what I do off the mat for my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training, this is important too. You only have so much time on the mat, so you want to spend that really, really wisely. You want to get to class early if you can, get your gi on if it's a gi class, get onto the mat, start rolling, start drilling, even before the class starts, and then pay attention to your instructor. As soon as they say go, go, and don't stop until they stop. And then when it's time for free training, again, hurry up, grab, put your mouth guard in or whatever, start training, and never let the clock be the thing that stops you from training. So don't stand there and face your opponent and wait until the bell says go. As long as it's okay and you're allowed, start wrestling even before the bell says go. Keep wrestling until it stops, and then immediately find another partner. And always be the last one off the mat. So until the instructor says you have to get off the mat, stop. Keep training. And the reason for that is, obviously, if you can get in an extra 5 minutes of training on the mat, an extra 10 minutes of drills because you're doing what I just said, when that adds up over a week and over 2 weeks and over 3 weeks and over a year and over 3 years, and suddenly if you're getting in, 20% extra training time, or you're coming in one extra day, you're training 20, 30% more than the other people in your class, then after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it's like you've got an extra year of training under your belt. So I'm a real big believer in that. I'm also a big believer in the exercise you do off the mat. Like I say, you can only train on the mat so many hours, but you have a lot more time off the mat where you can go to the gym, or you could stretch, you could do all kinds of things at home. So I call that your homework. And I do a lot of homework. So regardless of how many times I'm training, I exercise every single day. And that exercise will either be sprints, done using what's called a tabata protocol, which means you rest for half as long as you work, which is really hard. So if you're going to sprint for 30 seconds, you rest for 15 seconds, then you turn around and sprint back in the other direction for 30 seconds, then you rest for 15, and it just kills you because it's not enough time to recover. But I do sprints, I run stairs, on some days. I do upper body weightlifting workout. I do lower body weightlifting workout. I do a whole high-intensity interval training once or twice a week that uses that same tabata principle of having a clock that has me on for a certain amount of time, then off for no more than half that time. And it'll mix all kinds of jiu-jitsu-y sort of exercises that are similar to movements that we do in fighting and in grappling. And I'll have that run for 45 minutes, and it's just incredibly tiring. So all that stuff means is then when I step onto the mat to train, I'm bringing a machine that's stronger and faster and better. And I believe my diet helps there too, because eating a really clean diet keeps my energy level up, which helps me train for longer, which in turn makes you in better shape so you can train for longer. So it's all part of being sort of a complete fighter. And that's my off-the-mat regimen.
I love your attitude towards adding an extra roll or two each time, and that's even I think more important for somebody who can only train like once a week. If you could add an extra roll or two in, you're already very limited on your training time, but you might as well add, if you add 20% to what's only like 20 minutes of mat time, that's a big difference, and if you're able to go that one day or that 2 days a week, make the absolute most of it. You're already there. You already drove there. You're going to drive back and shower, and all that time is already spent. What's an extra few minutes? Be the last person to get off that mat. That's and then you do the same thing. While you're doing your off the mat training, you're pushing yourself to do so much more.
Well, Byron, just to add a thought to that, two thoughts to that. I totally agree. One is you're absolutely right. You've already invested the time and paid the money and got in your car and put your gi on and got out onto the mat and you've put in a whole class or whatever. Why not stay for a couple extra more minutes and get that one extra roll in and be more disciplined when you're in the class of not wasting time? And going from one night a week to 2 nights a week, well, that right there makes, that'll make 3 years of training into 6 years worth of training, by doubling the amount. So you look at these grandmasters or guys like Rickson Gracie or Rigan Machado, you say, how did they get so good? What are they, just natural, freaks of nature? And it's like, well, they may have natural capabilities. Of course they do. But it's not that. What it is they came from an environment where they could do a lot of jiu-jitsu and they could really think about it and they could really put that time in. And, you look at a master at any martial art, you say, how'd that guy get that good? Or a master at any sport? Well, this is the way it's done, by putting in an extra time. Because what might take you 10 years to accomplish, someone else can accomplish in 5 years of training if they're just training twice as often or putting twice as much attention to detail. Also, attention to technique is an important thing. It's very easy to say, I'm just going to train harder, I'm going to do more push-ups, lift more weight, get stronger or whatever, but, you can't get 100% stronger very easily. I mean, for some people who are in shape, they'll never get 100% stronger, but you can get 1,000% better at technique. I mean, you can improve your technique and double easily how good you are at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that's where you want to put your focus. And just one last thing, you mentioned having that same attitude of doing that extra work in your homework, in your off-the-mat training. I believe that I never make a decision, like when I'm running sprints, I know a certain amount of time I'm going to do, or when I'm running stairs, I know a certain amount of time I intend to go up and down, but lower than that, I would consider that I'm cheating. It's not even a workout. But when I'm done with that, I never say to myself, like when I'm starting that last sprint, like this is my last one. Because you should never decide when you're tired that it's your last exercise. Because if you decide that, then you'll do your last sprint or you'll do your last set of weights or whatever, and you've already decided you're done. But you made that decision when you were kind of feeling tired. Then if you just finish that last set and wait for a minute and just take a breath and just say, you know what, can I do one more? Of course you can. You can always do one more. So you do that one more. So I'll never make that decision before that last sprint that I'm done. I always wait until I think I'm done, and then right before I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to now stretch out and walk back to the car, I say, you know what? I can do one more. And then you do it. Another important thing in the way that I train is I try to mimic the fight on the mat, which is that you can't always control the pace and you can't control the timing. That's why I like that tabata method of training, whether it's on the sprints or the high interval training, that you're limited in your rest period. Even unpredictable rest periods is better. So training in yourself that ability to go when you don't think you can go. And I like that on sprints too. I like saying start your next sprint now. When you're not ready, you haven't yet caught your breath, you got to sprint anyway, or you're not quite ready, but start your next set on the weights. Keep the intensity up, because that's how it happens on the mat, and you can train that off the mat, that ability to say, I'm not ready to go, but I have to go now, and so I'm going to go again.
And your body gets better at dealing with that. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You're training both mentally, you get used to it. Like, I'm just used to going from 0 to 100 when I'm not ready and not prepared. It's just got to do that sprint again. Sorry, I know you feel like you're going to throw up, but it's time to sprint, because that's what happens on the mat. I'm used to it there too. But also, your body does get used to it. Everyone talks about aerobic training, which is expanding your ability to process oxygen quicker, bigger, better circulatory system, bigger lung capacity, that kind of stuff. But anaerobic training, which is training your muscles to function without enough oxygen. That's what we're talking about. Your ability to operate when your body is saying, oh, God, let me rest, to say, no, you don't actually need to rest, or you're not going to get to rest right now. Your body then responds and gets used to functioning on less oxygen. And then when you're doing both, you're doing anaerobic training, which means you're pushing yourself when you don't have enough oxygen, and you're doing aerobic training, that is, you're expanding your lungs and being able to deliver more oxygen. You've got everything working for you. By the way, another one of the reasons I advocate the vegan thing is, cholesterol, consuming high-fat things, red meat, whatever, cholesterol builds up in your body, and that, by definition, is blocking your arteries. It means it's cutting down on your blood flow. So you don't want to have any cholesterol build up in your arteries. Of course, if it builds up too much, it'll block your artery and you'll have a heart attack or a stroke. But for an athlete, you don't want a 5% blockage in your arteries. That's 5% less oxygen that can move through your body efficiently. So there is no cholesterol present in any plant product and non-animal products, so only what your body creates for itself. So that's why incidence of heart attack is much lower if you're not consuming a lot of meat, and that's why anyone who has a heart problem, their doctor will tell them, cut down on the animal products, cut down on the fat in the milk and the meat and whatever. But from an athletic point of view, an important side effect of that is you have a better circulatory system because there's no blockages going on, and that I'm after that.
That makes a lot of sense, the way you explain that, and the reason why it would be important to have a good method to deliver oxygen to your muscles is pretty clear as well. You mentioned earlier that you've seen a ton of changes in Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. What do you think of the current status for BJJ?
So I'm glad that BJJ's popularity continues to grow. I think that's great. I think it's a great sport, especially for women, from a self-defense aspect. My interest in martial arts has always been fighting and self-defense, first and foremost. I appreciate the art. It's interesting, and there's so much stuff going on with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, especially with the gi. You can do all kinds of cool things. And it starts to get a little bit away from its fighting roots. So the latest, most interesting Barambola sweep, or, really, worm guard and things like that are very cool on the mat, but there's likely nothing you're going to use if you get into an altercation on the street. So I try to keep my focus as much as possible on the stuff that is, while keeping myself interested with new things, just remember that it's the basics that win the actual real fight, whether it's in MMA or on the street. So that said, I notice, and it's a natural progression in the sport, that as more and more people come into the sport and more things are learned, then there are more and more counters. There'll always be something new. And so I do note that a lot of the really new, interesting stuff that catches people's attention in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really is this, what I would call very sporty, very much an interesting way to grab and wrap the gi and twist and turn. And so it doesn't personally interest me as much to get good at that, because like I say, it's very much a sport Jiu-Jitsu thing and doesn't have much other application. Although I totally respect people who can win world championships with it. That's great. They'll beat me, but my personal interest is not there. So I like the fact that more people are doing the sport. I get concerned that people not forget its fighting application. You see, increasingly I'm noticing there are people who are either training BJJ or training MMA, and they're really two different sports now. It didn't really used to be that way. And so that concerns me, that the people who are just sticking with BJJ are not really paying attention to the fighting aspect of it, to the importance of just having a good control position and being able to tap someone. It's not so much about the points. I mean, it's great, but the points in the competition are meant to reward you for getting to what could be a fight-ending position, but you do need to be able to end the fight, tap somebody out. So I want people to remember that as they immerse themselves in the sport. Don't forget that it is about tapping people out and dominating and controlling position. And then on the MMA side, I get a little concerned that that's become its own thing, and a lot of guys I know who are into MMA are training BJJ in the sense that they're training some grappling and stuff, but they don't really understand what good BJJ is because they're not paying attention to that. They're not training with a gi at all because they think that's unrealistic. I think training with a gi is really important for any fighter because when you train without a gi, things get so slippery, so fast, it's hard to learn anything new. And so if you can't learn anything new, you won't. But if you put the gi on, you can slow things down, you can learn new things that then you could turn around and adapt without the gi, whether it's an MMA fight or a submission grappling fight. So I get concerned that people who are into MMA not forget the BJJ roots and understand their fundamental principles that they may not be seeing when they watch a fight in the octagon. But if they look at who are the really good grapplers in the octagon, they'll notice that those guys all came through BJJ, and most of them, grew up wearing gis, and will say the same thing I'm saying, that training with the gi is very important in learning fighting, even if you intend to take the gi off. So that would be my concern. But what I'm happy to see the evolution of MMA and how it was accepted. A funny story. One of the original guys from Semaphore Entertainment, which was the original organization that put together the first UFC that Hoist won the first couple of UFCs, and Jorge and Gracie set up then it was sold off to Dana White and everybody after that. But came into my jiu-jitsu class and said, "Hey, what do I think?" Because I was recommended because I was training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at that time, hadn't yet closed my class, and they were looking for some American partners to bring Vale Tudo fighting, this no-holds-barred fighting that had been going on for decades in Brazil, to the United States. Basically, they were going to create the UFC. And I had seen those videotapes and understood the Vale Tudo fighting, and I said, "Oh no, this will never fly in the US, it's too violent." And I look back and just laugh at that now, because that was the guy who basically went on to create the UFC, and billion-dollar industry, and boy, did I call that one wrong. So I'm glad to see the growth of the UFC. But one of the things I note, it's become so much more of it's just not the same thing as what Vale Tudo was. I mean, that was such a different world. No weight classes. They called it no rules. There always were rules. You could never bite. You could never grab the guy's groin or, grab his cheek or fish hook, eye gouge. But basically speaking, you could kick in any position, you could elbow, you could knee, you could I think they didn't allow headbutts too. But so it's become very much more of a sport, which is fine. It's still super tough, super great. But with the weight classes, and now they're going to put the same uniforms on everybody. It'll be interesting seeing what happens. You see a little bit of the individuality going away. I kind of miss that sort of craziness of that. But basically, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a dose of reality in martial arts. Just remember, too, though, if you're training in MMA, that's very close to real fighting, but it's still not real fighting. It's still one-on-one, padded environment, no one hitting you over the head when you're not looking with a chair, no knives. So don't get complacent. If you want to be a good fighter, you've got to keep in mind what are all the real, actual fight situations that are going on. It's not just what goes on the mat.
Yeah, I think that's common for jiu-jitsu people to think about, I'm learning self-defense, but MMA, that's fighting, But in reality, like you said, his buddy's not next to him. Your friend may not be there. Anybody could have a weapon. There's the situational awareness is the guy in front of you. You only fight one person, and I think that's a common misconception for people to think that somebody who is a good MMA fighter has the skills to have great self-defense without having any of the mental side and being able to actually see what's going on.
Yeah, they're certainly better off than the average guy.
Yeah,
I mean, a good MMA fighter is a very good fighter. They're very tough. They can knock you out. They can tap you out. That's all very good. But a street fighter, a street fighter is not going to fight an MMA with a good MMA fighter. A street fighter is going to hit you before you ever know you were getting hit. So that's like you say, the situational awareness. Don't assume just because you're good on the mat that will automatically translate to you being able to win any fight on concrete out in front of a bar where there's a bunch of people standing around and cars parked on the side of the road. I mean, just stuff goes down that you need to remain attentive to. And so I think it's smart for anyone, even if you're training BJJ and MMA, to get a little bit of that into your training, get a little situation awareness into your training, get a little weapons sparring into your training, and do, by the way, do competition, because I think competition, while it's not a fight, a real fight, it does get you more adrenaline than you get in your normal training session with your buddies in your school. And I think you want that. It's good to practice how do you operate under some pressure. And one way to kind of fake that is go to a competition. There's pressure there, and you'll get used to that feeling of adrenaline.
That just helps your body to deal with that and helps you move the way you would like to move, but a lot of times you can't if you're just overrun with all that adrenaline.
Right.
So you mentioned competition is a great way to help kind of bump up your self-defense. What does competition do for you? You've been competing for so many years, and why do you do it? What's it do for you?
So competition does a couple things for me. Number one is, as I've said, it gives me that, adrenaline feeling, so I feel confident that I can operate under pressure. It's not the same feeling as if you are scared for your life or something like that, but it's definitely not your normal feeling. I mean, walking into a big competition, thousands of competitors, stepping on the mat at a black belt level or at any level, it's definitely adrenaline. But the truth is, I've done that so many times now that's not really why I go anymore. I don't get that same adrenaline feeling anymore because I'm pretty confident. But what it does do for me is it gives me a goal to work towards, So especially, maybe when you're moving up through the ranks of BJJ, some people are after the belt, and that for them is a goal. I never was, because I dreaded every belt I got because it just meant more responsibility. Now everybody beneath me is sort of gunning for me. And that was always the case with all the guys coming up through Machado. We would be getting upset, denying belts, like, I don't want to wear this. And it certainly was that case. I got my black belt on the same day as Chris Howder and Rick Williams, and we all had the same reaction, which is like, we are not ready for this. We do not want this. And Hagen said, no, you got to take it. He said, you'll grow into it. And that's true. I mean, it's called a heavy belt. You put that across your hips, you're going to have to live up to it, and so you work extra hard. But without that at the black belt level, I need something to push me forward. So knowing there's a competition coming up, and I think that's good for anybody. It's a chance to say, hey, you're doing your regular training, you're trying to stay in shape, but when there's a competition in 2 months, you start, watching your diet a little bit better, and you start training a little harder, and you start thinking about that competition, and it makes you really think about, well, how did I lose last time, and what do I need to get better at? So it just gives you a goal. And I think for some people, having that goal is really good. And then even if you don't do the competition, okay, fine, but you still have the goal. But the thing to remember with the competition, and I actually have a book that is called Training for Competition, and BJJ and Submission Grappling, and it's available on Amazon. And that is a book that is really good for beginners because it gives a good basic look at competition for people who don't have experience, but it also got some good, really, advice. But the basic advice I'll tell you right now is oddly and paradoxically, you will do better in competition if you don't care. Meaning, you go to a competition, you care enough, you want to win, obviously you're not going there to lose, but you'll have a better chance of winning if you actually don't care so much about winning. And the reason for that is you won't put yourself under stress. You'll therefore be more relaxed. You'll be more attentive to what's going on. You'll be able to learn from a loss so you can come back and win next time. So for me, the jiu-jitsu competition is both something to physically train towards, but it's also something that's just fun to measure myself at and just to see, am I getting better? And whether I win or not is not the point. And that's what I'm saying. If you take that pressure off of yourself, if you say, it's okay, I don't have to win or not win, by taking that pressure off of yourself, ironically, you're more likely to win because you will perform better. But at the end of the day, I tell people, it's like there's a bracket. I'm holding my fingers, my thumb and my forefinger apart right now, with my finger is high and my thumb is lower, and it's like a distance of a couple of inches. And so on the bottom of that is the worst I could possibly do. I don't care who you are, if you're not up at that level, if you're a 6-year-old kid, you're not going to beat me. I don't care if I'm vomiting and can barely lift my head up. You can't beat me, right? So worst I could possibly do. And then on the top, my other finger is showing like the best I could possibly do. You know what? I can be on the best possible day of my life, and I'm not going to beat Marcelo Garcia. It's not going to happen. Or Higan Machado. It's not going to happen. So I don't care if they're on their worst day of their life, because their whole bracket is above me. Their worst is better than my best, right? So if I go into a competition and I'm up against someone whose bracket is that much better than me, I can't possibly win, and it's not my fault. I competed the best I could possibly do, but they are better than me because they've been training for longer and stronger or whatever it is. It's not my fault. So I can only control, I can try to raise that bracket up. I can try to get better so that my best is better and my worst is better, right? And I can certainly try to come on that day and operate at the top of my bracket, get enough sleep, have trained properly, done everything right, so I'm going to be doing a performance that's right near the top of what I'm capable of. But whether or not I win is not about me. Now you got to look at that other guy's bracket and say, well, what did he do? And did he come in at his top? And is his top better than mine? So you don't have control over win or lose, so you shouldn't worry about it. Forget about it. Just go out there and bring yourself the best bracket you can, operating at the highest level you can. That's the best you can do. And guess what? If you're better than the guy, you're going to win. And if you're not better, you're going to lose. And don't worry about it because it's not under your control.
You've mentioned a lot there. I'm trying to take in just the first part when you were talking about the mindset of not caring if you win or lose. You'll tend to do better. That's for day of the competitions. Your mindset, like just helping you relax. Is that do you have that mindset, during the training camp and while you're getting ready for it, or do you really train hard and you want to win and do well in the time up to that day?
Yeah, that's a good question. So everybody wants to win, right? And I train hard and I intend to win for sure. And so in the what you're calling the training camp or the time leading up to the competition, I'm very focused on winning. I imagine myself winning. But the thing is, when you start to get close to a competition, and a lot of people experience this, you get nervous, or you start to wonder, who am I going to compete against, or are they any good? And you can feel butterfly in your stomach, and that's the feeling I never want to feel, because that just drains your energy. And if that happens a week before the competition, it drains your energy on your training that day, so you don't train as well, or you don't sleep as well. So in my training camp, I'm very intent and focused on winning, and even when I step into the competition arena or on the mat, I am very focused on winning. I mean, I'm very confident that I'm going to win, and I'm very clear on what I'm going to do, but I'm not putting pressure on myself. It's okay if I don't win. I guess that's what I mean when I say I don't care. It's not that I don't intend to win. I'm going to do my best, and I believe that I can win, but I don't care. I'm not emotionally connected to it. I've lost enough times, and sometimes you just have to lose a little bit to get over it, to realize that my mom will still love me, my students will still think I'm good, my friends will still like me. Nobody cares but you. Maybe your coaches, if you've got a coach that's really, wants to have a really great competition team. But the truth is, and if the coach cares that much, he should be getting out there and competing himself. It's like a parent living through their kids, Bottom line is, nobody cares but you. Nobody will remember your losses. And you won't remember your losses. You'll remember your wins. Meaning, I don't have a medal for my loss. If I lost, or unless I medaled and got second place, I guess you could say that's a reminder that I didn't win. But basically, you get rewarded for victories, and that stays with you. That's what you write on your website. Winner of this competition. You don't write loser of that competition. So no one cares about the losses. People only care about the wins. And so what I'm saying is, you can be focused on winning, and your intent should, of course, be to win, but you shouldn't be emotionally invested in it. It should be okay. You should be okay with losing. Your self-esteem and your self-worth should not be wrapped up in whether you win in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition, because it's not under your control.
Yeah, it's so much, like you mentioned, depends on the person who's across the mat, and they may be in a different level than you, and there's nothing you can do about that. Just show up and do your best,
right?
And go to work. So we've talked about competing, and I think it's great for people to experience a competition, but in the reality of it, you go to a gym that has 50 people that are training, you may have half a dozen of them that are active competitors, and you probably have quite a few more that have tried it that are not currently looking to compete. So for like the person who is just training and going to work and having a good time on the mat, obviously your focus is not there to develop. It would be, if you have a competition in a month, how could they continue to make sure to push themselves and to add techniques to their game or to make the techniques they have even better in the long run, in doing this for years down the road? How do people stay focused without it?
So that's a good question, and you need to have some personal discipline in this regard. Like your teacher may push you. I mean, you want to get better. Other students are getting better. If you're a competitive person, you're measuring yourself against the other students in your class, and you want to get better than them. Of course, you got to remember that everybody's getting better. So sometimes you can't control that either. So that's not a good gauge for if you're getting better, if you're having more success against the other students in your class, because everybody's getting better. You can more gauge yourself on new people coming in. Are they getting easier for you to deal with? Some people are coming to jiu-jitsu just because they enjoy it. They just enjoy the experience of it, and they may not care that they're actually getting better. I mean, they'd like to get better, but that's not what it's about. It's about showing up, getting the exercise, learning new things, having fun, and that's great. Just enjoy that. But if you do want to get better and want to improve, which I think most people do, your instructor will be pushing you to do that. He or she will be teaching you new techniques and giving you drills. But I think you've got to take some personal responsibility for your training and you can set for yourself goals that are not the competition goals. Like, you can say to yourself, all right, I have this one thing that works for me, and I tend to rely on it. So for the next month, I'm not going to use it. Every time I get into the situation where my one good move is there, I'm not going to do it. So I'm not going to pull the guy to my guard, or I'm not going to do that one choke. And what that forces you then to do is to develop something new. Keep in mind, every time that you do a move on the mat that works, that's great. You're reinforcing that, but you're basically practicing something that you clearly, obviously, already know how to do. So you're practicing it again and again and again, and you keep convincing yourself, I can do this move, I can do this move. So what you want to be doing is not practicing the moves that you already know, but practicing new moves and trying to make them work. So there has to be a point where you say, every single time I grapple, I pull people to my guard. I'm making this up because that's what I like, and I always try this one sweep. Well, once you've pretty much worked out that sweep, that you know how to do it, and once, if the person makes the right things and the situation is right, it's going to work, then you got to say, I'm not going to do that at all. I'm going to start in a totally different situation. I'm going to pull people in my guard, and I'm going to try a different sweep. Or I'm going to ask someone, you know what, I always pull people in my guard. I never get onto the mount. I'm a small person. Can we start this match? Can we start right now? Will you let me on the mount and we just go from there? People will say yes. And so you can put yourself in different positions and not keep running the same routine again, and again. That's what I would recommend. And so by doing that, you set yourself up a little personal goal. So you can say, you know what, I never get on the mount. All I'm going to try to do for the next month is every time I grapple with people, I'm going to try to mount. And if I get on the mount, I'm going to try to stay there. Or if you can't get on the mount, you might say to your partner, hey, we're starting. Can I start on the mount? I really suck on the mount. They say yes. You start on the mount, and then you quickly lose it. But your goal is, by the end of this month, when I start on the mount, I want to be sure that I can hold it for 2 minutes without the person getting out. So you can set personal goals for advancement in certain areas that have nothing to do with competition, and that can excite you, and then you meet that goal. So that's how I would suggest you do it for yourself. But you've got to do that consciously. It's not going to happen on your own. An instructor might force you to do it. I do that in my classes. Sometimes in the middle of grappling, I'll tell everyone switch, meaning if whatever position you're in right now, swap it. So if you were about to be choked, the other guy is about to be choked. If you work to get on the mount, sorry. And it's really interesting because it gets all those little people who are always fighting on their back and never on top. Suddenly they're sitting on top of that big guy, and it changes everything. And eventually it corrects itself. But an instructor can do that, but you can't wait for the instructor to do it. You got to do it for yourself. So you got to say, this week, unless you're in the very basics. If you're in very basics, just keep learning everything basic. But once you're, 6 months in as a white belt and you kind of understand what's going on, you can start to say, I want to work this one thing, and I'm just going to always work this situation and try to get there, and make it something that you're not already good at, or make it something that's related to something you're good at. So if you're very good at, triangle, you might say, okay, I'm going to stop triangles, but what I'm going to do is set up omoplatas. I'm going to set up shoulder locks with my legs that are similar to triangles, but it's a different move, because chances are you'll have some success at that. So that's a good plan too.
I like the switch idea. I've never heard anybody say that before, but it reminds me when I was a white belt. You grapple with somebody who's, in my day it was a good white belt, and I think, man, if I could just get mount, I would do okay, because I could never even get a sweep. I couldn't do anything to anybody. And in reality, you switch and you get mount, and they're good from that position. They're able to escape and things. And then you mentioned about picking a position. Like, I want to work my top mount. That a lot of that relies on you having good training partners. When I was a white belt, if you asked me, can I start in mount, I would have thought you were crazy. Like, that's not fair. I don't want you to start mount. But having, trained a little while, I realized that's an important part of training. And if you're not able to get to the mount, you still want to be able to work on that. And so, being able to find somebody who will work with you on that, and it probably will be more likely a little bit more advanced student. Probably white belts will probably still think you're a little crazy for asking to start in mount. That's not fair to fight that way.
I understand that, and maybe you would ask a more advanced student, or you would say, listen, I'm bad on the mount.
Yeah.
Because that's the reason that you're starting to say that, so, because if you're really good on the mount, you shouldn't be asking for that. But I hear what you're saying, and having great training partners is really important. Having a really friendly environment where you got to remember, you got to be a good training partner too.
Yeah.
When you help other people learn, they're going to get better. If you want to have step back here. If you walk into a new school, and you can beat everybody, you're probably not at the right school. But you might still have stuff to learn there just because you're competitively better. But basically speaking, you know a lot more than the people there. So when you walk into a school or you're on a mat where you can't beat anybody, you are in the right place. I love mats like that. I hunger, and there are some where I walk onto the mat and I just can't beat anybody. Everyone's better than me. Then I'm in the right place. Start sucking it up, man. Start learning. And so you want your training partners to be good. You want them to be better than you so they can push you forward. So how do you make them better? You be a good training partner. You don't injure people, and be cooperative and let them be cooperative, whatever they need, because if they get better, you get better, and you get better, they get better. And those are the kinds of mats that are the best team-oriented mats that produce the best teams.
Yeah, that's it's not just the person. In an interview just last week, we were talking about it's not just the instructor that's there to teach. Your training partners are a huge part of your learning and development.
Right.
You talk about having a game plan in your book, Training for Competition. Could you just give us a tip or two about maybe a newer student and how important it is to have a game plan going into competition?
Yeah, especially for competition or for any fight that you want to win. So if you just want to cruise and enjoy jiu-jitsu on the mat for a training session, that's great. Let it go where it goes. Try to win. It's kind of meditative that way. Be in the moment. That's great. But if you want to, it helps if you want to win the match, especially something like a tournament, to have a game plan, which means you know what you're going to try to do. It's starting from the minute the match starts. That helps. Now, it may very quickly not go that way at all. You may know, I'm going to try to do this particular takedown because I'm good at it, and here's how I set it up, and once that happens, I'm going to try to do this. And it's just a couple of different steps. And you step out on the mat, and the guy pulls you to guard. Well, they're whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
But the point is, you're more likely to succeed at something than if you don't. If you know what you're trying to do, than if you're just saying, "Hey, I'll sort it out when I get there." Right? So John Will, my Australian BJJ buddy, just phenomenal coach. Your audience should check him out online. He writes a blog and he's got a bunch of books and DVDs. He's just super brilliant coach. he tells a story, and a huge martial arts experience outside of BJJ, amazing fighter. He tells a story of a time when he had two students, and they were doing, stand-up sparring, and this was either him or someone he knew, and he was there when it happened, took the students aside, and this is full contact sparring, and said to one of them, good job, man, get out there, protect yourself, and, show me what you got. And said to the other one, I'll give you $50 if you hit him in the nose. And needless to say, a couple seconds in, boom, the guy catches it right in the nose, because the one guy was focusing on just like hit the nose, hit the nose, hit the nose, hit the nose. So it's like plan beats no plan. So if you just say the other guy's coming out there and he's going to jump around and sort of do whatever, and I'm going to set him up for my takedown, or when I get him in my guard, I'm going to do these three things with a plan. You get right on it. It may not happen the way you want, but you're more likely that it is going to happen because you actually are trying for it. You're not just being, I'll wait and I'll see what happens. That's a reactive state. And in that reactive state, you're more likely the other guy's going to take initiative, and you're going to be defending, and he's going to be pressing the action because you went out there to defend. So I think it's more successful when you can have a plan, be flexible. You can't control what's going to happen, but have a game plan. I'm going to try to do this, and I'm going to try to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense the way you've explained it. I want to go back and talk about the team a little bit. What is the role of a blue belt that's in a jiu-jitsu school? What kind of, other than just training and grappling, what do you think of as a good blue belt?
So are you asking me what I think the attributes of a good blue belt are?
No, like socially, what should a blue belt be doing? Okay. And do they need to be helping coach the white belts? Do they need to be smashing them or trying to tap the purples? Like, what? I
understand.
Okay.
I understand. So from a position of the role in the school, everybody's role is to be a good partner to everybody, obviously, and be respectful and create an environment that is a safe, fun environment. Fun. If it's fun, people will train more, and you'll have more people training. If it's not fun, people won't train. Then have less partners. You won't get as good. So even just from a selfish point of view, but in terms of the layout of the school, whereas a white belt's job is just to show up and try to learn basically, and not hurt other white belts and not get hurt. A blue belt is in a position to be helpful to white belts, so to understand that when you're training with someone, train at the level that they're at. Don't just humiliate them. Keep in mind, some people, a good example of this, maybe not the best example, but Eddie Bravo, who's great. We trained together. I think I taught him his first BJJ class, or I'm certainly there for his first BJJ class at John Jacques School, John Jacques Machado. But Eddie Bravo was, had high school wrestling experience, and he was good, but he sort of came onto the mat, and he just turned into, over time, this phenomenal, brilliant innovator, and so great. But he wasn't like Mr. Super Athlete when he started. He was a tough guy, but he just came on as like a regular guy. And especially at John Jacques School, there are all these guys that walk in. The term we use is businessmen. It doesn't really mean businessmen, but it means just average guy off the street, not a killer athlete, comes into that school and becomes incredibly good because nobody smashed them on their first day and said, "Hey, yo, businessman, put your suit back on and go home."
Yeah.
Because people who are not great athletes can come in and can survive and cannot have the crap beaten out of them and send them home with bruises, and so that they don't have fun, so they don't come back. It allows people who actually have the potential to be brilliant technical innovators and great athletes, they just haven't discovered it yet, to survive in that environment. So I think an important role for a blue belt is not to be the guy that gives a white belt such a hard time that they never want to come back. You can beat them, you can teach them, you do want them to know why they're there in the first place. And so seeing that, wow, I can't beat this guy, I'm being dominated by that guy, I want to be like that guy, is great. So there's a fine line between showing someone why they're there, meaning, dude, there's a lot for you to learn, and I'm going to show that to you right now with what I do to you. There's a line between that and humiliating someone or beating them so badly that they just don't have fun. So, and one great way to do that, by the way, to be that role really well, whether you're blue belt or purple belt or even a black belt, is when you beat somebody, when the time is up and it's okay to talk for a moment, either you're about to get another partner or the whole thing is over, to tell someone, if you have time, just tell them, here's what happened, here's what you did wrong, in my opinion. Like, I got on top of you, the reason I got on top of you is because you did that. Tell them, help them. Or wait after class, just show them, say, remember when we were grappling back then and I caught you in this thing? I want to show you what you did that made it easy for me to catch, and if you would have done this instead, it wouldn't happen. Because I want that guy to not make that mistake again. Because I know if he makes that mistake, I can get him. I just got him. So now I want him to get better. So I have to get better. So doing that, taking on that role of sharing with someone what you think they're not doing correctly. I mean, you don't want to start teaching. You're not the teacher as a blue belt. But if you know for sure that someone just made a mistake, you can mention to them, hey, the reason I got your back is because you turned away like that. Next time, don't do that. That's a helpful thing. Yeah,
and it's going to help. Unselfishly, you help somebody else, but selfishly, you're helping your team. That's going to help you down the road, and you're going to continue to get better as well.
Exactly.
Do you have anything else you want me to mention?
Well, first, it's great to meet you. I'm glad you're doing the podcast. I hope that this is fun for people to listen to. You know, everybody is on their path, right? And a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is just a white belt who didn't stop. That's it. If you just keep training, it might take you 10 years, might take you 20 years, whatever, but you're going to learn, and it's not about the belt anyway, it's more about, it's a lifetime of learning, and Carlos Gracie, Elio Gracie certainly talked about this, you know, just living a jiu-jitsu lifestyle, which is a lifestyle of health and friendship, and the great ability to adapt on the mat is so useful in the world. I mean, I use that in my charity. You know, I do verbal jiu-jitsu with people. I don't confront them straight away. I basically sort of understand where they're coming from and figure out, well, how do I want to get them to where I want them to be, and then take their hand and guide them along that path. And I think so. You want to do things that keep you in the game, keep your body healthy so you can keep training, make it fun. So you train for a really long time and you can get the real benefit of a jiu-jitsu lifestyle, which is the physical training, it is the self-defense, but it's also the friendship, it's also the confidence, and those are the things that you really want for yourself. And I think, you know, it's nice to encourage your friends, especially your female friends, because jiu-jitsu is so powerful for women from a self-defense point of view. And it's hard for a woman to get into jiu-jitsu. It's hard to get on a mat with big guys and everyone's sweating, and a lot of women are not used to that contact sport. Some men aren't either. So making it possible for women to enter into the sport is hugely impossible. It could be your mom or your sister, you know, or your daughter who gets saved because they know some jiu-jitsu. So make it possible for women to come onto the mat. Make it a welcoming environment. And that's just great for society. And the other thing I would add is, again, remembering, keep your ego out of it. Don't go onto the mat every day to see who can I beat, you know, because that ego is going to hold you back. That ego is going to keep you from trying new things and losing. It's going to keep you from competing because you'll be so bummed out when you lose. You're not going to go back and do that experience again. We had a saying at the Machado School that was written right on a banner right above the front door that said, "Leave your ego at the door." And that's so true. Just go out on the mat and be open and willing to learn. And don't worry about losing. Tapping is learning. It's fine. Expose yourself to new situations. If you travel, bring your gi and drop in on the BJJ school over there and very respectfully ask, you know, if you can train, pay the money or whatever. Don't try to beat their students. Just enjoy it and learn. One of the best ways that I've learned new moves is I go to new schools and I do not walk in there and smash their students. Because if you do that, they'll just try to smash you back and they'll be impressed that you're good. But they're not going to want to help you get better because you're already better than them. But you walk in there really nice, you tap to people a couple times, then they'll say, oh, well, let me help you out. And then they'll show you what they did and you learn things. So get rid of your ego, leave your ego at the door. That is, ironically, the best way to get better.
I like your travel advice. You know, like, what's the point in going to a school and show them that you're a superhero grappler, then leaving? You might as well have a good time. That's why you're there, and learn a few things. And people will open up to you a little bit better if you're nice to them on the mat.
If you're not trying to beat them, and honestly, that will be the test. If you leave your ego at the door, giving up a tap, letting someone tap you out when you didn't have to, but you're doing it because it's your first day of travel. You're going to be there for like 3 days training at their school. You could see this guy is good. He probably has something to teach you. Even if you're better than him, he probably has something he's good at, and he's going to share it with you if you make him feel comfortable. And so what I will do, and I'm a black belt, is I will go in and I will train with black belts. I won't give up a tap usually to a purple belt, but, brown belt, it's like, if that guy's really good, and I think, wow, what's he doing? I'd like to learn that. I'll roll with him. I'll make him respect me. I may tap him a couple times, but I'll let him tap me once, and then I'll say to him, and I'll smile, I'll say, that was really good. How did you do that? And then they're like very happy. They're like, wow, well, because they respect you, and they think, wow. And then they're kind of proud to show, well, this is the move that I did. He's proud. I tapped a black belt out. Well, good, because I walk away and I just learned a new move. And so just leave your ego at the door. It's like no one cares if you lose. You just want to get better.
And from what I understand, nobody's ever came and took away one of your medals that you have won from a previous tournament if you get tapped by somebody out. I mean, there's really no big negative thing if your ego could handle it.
There's no, well, you go to, 100, you can spend 10 years and go to, 10 world championships, or 50 championships, and you lose in your first match in every single one. But in one of those championships, you actually do pretty good, and you win, or you get second place. 10 years from now, you're going to have, I was second place in the world, or I was second place in the state at that time, and you're going to show it to your kid or whatever, and it's great. And you won't remember, like I say, no one cares about the losses. In fact, the losses, that's what makes you better. There's no better way to learn a technique than to be tapped out in competition with it. Some of my best techniques that I use now came because I lost to them in competition. Because when I got exposed to that technique and that happened, you bet I went up to that guy after and said, "Can you show me what you did?" And they're happy to do it because they're proud of it. And I worked that, and then my goal was I'm going to get someone else with that move. And I'm certainly not going to get caught with it again. So sometimes it takes, unless you're going outside of your school and traveling a lot like I did and do, you tend to see the same techniques again and again and again because you're only getting what your instructor is bringing to you, maybe what you see off of YouTube. So sometimes the only way you get exposed to new techniques is going into a competition. And the first time you see a technique, guess what? It's probably going to work. That's okay. That's cool, but let that inspire you. Let that be your technique of the month. Now go back and learn that. So, yeah, leave your ego at the door. Get better. And the way to get better is to be willing to lose and be willing to learn.
As we're talking about this, I've seen people at tournaments after matches showing their competitor what they did. Like the person, what was that? What'd you do? And then they gladly show them, and they get to share their knowledge with somebody who they just competed with. So
I actually, I don't tap in tournaments a lot at a black belt level. Most of us are pretty good. We may win, we may lose, but we generally don't tap. But you know what? I go for it, and especially now that I'm in sort of the older age limit stuff, a lot of the guys, we're going to go out there. We're going to try and make each other tap. And I went for years without even giving up an advantage, let alone a point or tapping for years. And then, I couldn't train as much anymore, and other things are happening. And so recently, I won a few. But recently, I actually lost in a tournament in the finals. I tapped, and it's just one of those weird things. And it was a wrist lock. And the guy I was competing against was very good. I'd never trained with him before. I watched him tap out his first competitor. I tapped out my first guy. And I thought for sure I was going to beat him. And everything was fine. I was passing the guard. He kind of pulled me to guard. He had a very strong guard. And then catches me in a wrist lock with my wrist bent, and I had to tap immediately. And so I thought he must have done some amazing move, So I asked him afterwards, I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Oh, you bent your wrist. I saw it, so I jumped on it." So, but that was really good for me, and everyone's always happy to talk about it. And that was really good that I asked him, because I would have otherwise thought he set me up and got me in a wrist lock, and I don't care that much about wrist locks because I'll tap in a tournament because I don't want to hurt my wrist. But to me, it's not really a fight-ending technique if a guy's adrenalized. So it's not that important to me to learn it, but it was very important for me to hear him say, no, David, you bent your wrist, and it was right in front of me, and because of where it was, I was able to get my hip up against it and press it down. So that was a very simple lesson for me to learn. I will never do that again, and I'm so glad that he showed me that, because now I know that I'll never do that again. So you always want to ask what happened.
Great story, and I appreciate you for sharing that. Before I let you go, if somebody is thinking about going and getting a dog or a cat, sell me on the idea of going to your website and adopting one that needs a little bit of help.
Okay, this is good. So here's the deal. Animal shelters are generally filled with dogs and cats of all type, and other animals too, that need homes. And some people feel like, I don't want to go to an animal shelter because I don't know the history of that dog or that cat. They could be aggressive. Maybe they were abused. I want to get a puppy so that I can raise them exactly how I want, safer for my kids, all that kind of stuff. And I understand that feeling. Or I want a purebred dog. There's something, the animals in the shelters are sick or something like that. Well, trust me when I tell you, because I know what I'm talking about here, that none of that is true. The truth is, most animals in shelters are in shelters because of nothing having to do with any behavior problem or anything like that. Somebody had a bunch of puppies, they couldn't find homes for them, and so they took them over to the shelter. Now they're in the shelter. Somebody got married, their wife was allergic, they couldn't find a new home for the dog, so they dropped off at the shelter. Someone lost their job. The pet got lost and didn't have a tag on it, and the person didn't go to the shelter to find them, so now that pet's up for adoption. It's a million reasons animals end up in the shelter needing a new home that have nothing to do with any problem with the animal or anything like that. And the animals coming out of shelters are healthy. They can be a little traumatized sometimes, but then they're so loyal to you and so, for having rescued them. So I would say that if what you want is a known quantity, a puppy is kind of an unknown quantity.
Yeah.
If you tell me right now, if you point me to a baby, a person, and say, there's a baby, go introduce yourself to that infant, and go introduce yourself to this 6-year-old kid, and tell me which one do you think is going to grow up to be a murderer, right? Well, I can see the personality of the 6-year-old kid. If he's a friendly kid and he's perfectly normal and well-adjusted, I'll say, well, I'm going to bet that the baby is going to be the murderer because I can't tell anything about the personality of the baby. And even if you raise the baby yourself, someone raised Hitler, you know what I mean? So, the point is, you can't tell just because you have a puppy that the puppy is going to grow up and be really good with other dogs or not really good or might develop a tendency to bite or whatever. You can do your best, but no two pets are alike. Just like no two people who grew up in the same family are exactly the same personality, and one can be nice and one can be mean. Same thing with dogs. So at the shelter, you can, if you're dealing with an animal that's not a puppy, you can actually see their size. You can see their behavior. You can see they're good with dogs. You can see they're good with kids. And now it's just a matter of getting them used to your house. So I think people should check it out. Go to adoptapet.com. You'll be astounded how many animals are in shelters. And a lot of these animals are dying. 4 million of them are killed for lack of a home every year in the United States. And that's, to me, crazy to go pay for an animal to be born and come into the world if there's a perfectly great animal just sitting there at your local shelter, to adopt. So I think people need to open up their mind, check out the shelter first, and hopefully you can find a perfect animal for you to adopt right there. Save a life, and you get a great friend for life.
Yeah, I'm a dog lover. I've got my dog sitting right next to me right now, and my wife found her years ago as a stray that was in like a business district, and somebody was going to they said they were going to shoot her, so they got her out of that situation. She'd been running around. And the weird thing about her, she's a perfect dog. She eats until her belly is going to explode. I think that's from being a stray. So,
having been a stray. Well, I'll tell you what, I've had fantastic animals my whole life. Just one passed away recently, my dog Peach. She was with me for 15 years, found on just a stray off the street, no known background. It's just animals, unless an animal's been actively abused, which most are not, just a bit of neglect or something, that's something that you can fix with a little bit of love. And I just know, I can tell you again and again, the best pets I know are pets that came from shelters and got rehomed from shelters, and mixed breed pets too. Purebred is really a form of inbreeding. They keep breeding the same animals together to try and create a certain trait or a certain behavior, and these days it's just a certain look, and that you get all these health problems. And so, you can certainly find purebred pets in shelters too. They have all the same, life problems of their own as anybody else, but I'm really into mixed breed pets. I think they're genetically healthier. I think they're unique. I'm a big fan of mixed breed pets. But just consider, if you're a person that doesn't want to go to a shelter to adopt, just think about, you go get your dog from a breeder. That's, whatever. You get a dog. You have had your dog for 2 years. Something happens to you. You die. You get hit by a car, or something changes in your life and you can't keep your dog. But you've raised that dog perfectly well. That dog is great, but you can't keep the dog. None of your friends can help. Your dog ends up in a shelter. Now, someone else is going to look at that dog and say, oh, no, I don't know the history of that dog. I'm going to go get a puppy. But that's the same dog that yesterday was on your couch, was your dog, was a great dog. The only difference between that dog is now they're physically in a shelter or physically in your house. It's the same dog. So you can't look at shelter pets as shelter animals. They're just someone's animal that used to be in their house that's now in the shelter for some reason that's not their fault. And so help them out. Go adopt.
There we go. I love it. And we'll put a link to that and all the other resources. Your book on Amazon and everything on there is on the show notes as well. But I couldn't agree with you more. If you're looking to get a pet or anything, go by his website. Check it out.
Check out the shelter first. That's all. And if you can't find the exact kind of animal you want, then go, do whatever you're going to do. But there's no reason not to check out an animal shelter first. And you've got adoptvet.com, so you can see all of the shelters and all the rescues. And if you're looking for a particular type of animal or purebred or whatever, you can even run that search on our site and give us your email, and we will rerun that search for you every night. And if a month from now some pet at some shelter within 50 miles matches what you're looking for, you're going to get an email. You can go get that pet. Just be patient.
Do you have any idea how many pets you've helped become adopted?
We estimate over 500,000 at this point over the years. We're not there at the point of adoption, so we'll connect you up with the pet, but then you go to the shelter, and we don't ever really know did you actually adopt. But we hear from shelters, and we've put together what data we can, and it's probably about 500,000 animals saved. So we're happy for that. And we want to do a lot more.
That's great.
Till every shelter is empty.
That's great, and that's a great goal. Thanks for being on here with me, and I hope people have. I know they've learned a lot about jiu-jitsu, and if they're interested in learning more about having a diet that's like yours or getting a new pet, they look further into those resources that you were able to provide today.
Okay, well, thanks so much. All
right, I'll talk to you later, David.
Bye.
I want to thank David Meyer for the interview. A lot of fun talking with him, getting to know him over the phone there. You probably heard some wind chimes if your earphones or earbuds are any good. You heard his wind chimes. If that was annoying to you, you gotta relax, man. It's a wind chimes. Relax. And to me, we were doing the interview and I heard the wind chimes. It's like I was hanging out with him. If that's where David Meyer is and we're hanging out, I'm going to be hearing wind chimes. That's part of the experience of talking with somebody and being in his environment. It wasn't like he's on a loud street with cars honking and you couldn't hear him. It's just he welcomed us into his home, and that's just what was there. So
that's awesome. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, definitely if I heard cars honking, road rage incidents breaking out, then I might get a little upset. But wind chimes, boy, that's just going to calm you down. How can you go wrong with that?
It reminded me
it probably comes down to dogs. Here's a guy who has the largest nonprofit pet adoption agency. So that's awesome.
If you're looking for a pet, check them out. We'll put links to adoptapet.com, and there's little dashes in between adopt and a, and then another one between pet. But and also bjjamerica.com. Great resource there.
Speaking of adopting the pets, definitely check out that site. But think about everybody who does jiu-jitsu, or a lot of your friends that do jiu-jitsu. It seems like there's a lot of pets, with the name Hoist or Henzo, or it's kind of crazy. I remember I had a dog named Magic after Magic Johnson. My last dog was named Cuse after Syracuse University. But I have yet to get the grappling jiu-jitsu dog yet. I'll have to do that here in the future.
Do you have any idea who you'd pick to name the dog after?
Personally, I was thinking Byron. You set yourself up for that one.
Nobody name your dog Byron. That's not recommended.
But I will tell you, the very next dog I get, and I will definitely go through David's site. So he's doing a lot of good things, not just in jiu-jitsu, but taking care of dogs.
Yeah, it's non-profit, not that
not
making
just
money
dogs,
is a bad thing, but he's doing it to help animals. That's awesome.
Yep, great guy.
We mentioned at the beginning of the show that next week we have a first part of a 2-part episode with Sam Spiegelman. He's going to be answering questions about strength and conditioning. We're fortunate to get a big list of questions, and we start going through them, and the interview went a little long. Cut it right in half down the middle there, and we have a 2-parter, just topic to topic. I mean, it's all in his area of expertise, but if you're looking to get a little bit of an edge or to just get a little bit better conditioning or mobility, it's going to be a good episode for you, or 2 episodes for you. That should be coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, so definitely don't miss those episodes. It's going to help you become stronger, faster, quicker, smaller if you're trying to lose weight, or whatever you're trying to do. It's only going to help your game.
Yeah. If you want to get a hold of us, our email address is bjjbrick@gmail.com. That's probably the single best way. We also do have a Facebook page, and you can message us on there. We get a message a couple times a week, and we do appreciate any encouragement that you guys send us, and we're both able to read those. Usually I'll forward the emails to Gary, but we both see them on the Facebook there, and that's very encouraging, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, and don't forget to go to iTunes. Give us a review. Let us know how you like the show or what we can do to improve, and try to make it funny. We like funny reviews, and if you do give us a funny review, send us email either on Facebook or bjjbrick@gmail.com. Let us know that it was you, because we'll send you out a gi patch. As long as you're not in the United States, we're just too poor right now to send it overseas. But we'll get you. It's a small BJJ Brick gi patch. You can wear proudly on your gi. And also, too, we're located right in the Midwest here, Wichita, Kansas. If you happen to be driving through or vacationing in sunny Wichita, Kansas, or here for work for a week or so, definitely give us a call. We'd love, or give us an email, a message. We'd love to train with you or and pick your brain, learn from you. So we'd love to do that.
Absolutely, that's always that's a good time when we're able to train with the listeners, and that's part of the fun of the martial art. People when they travel, they bring their gi, or they do some no gi if the packing's a little bit tight. But come and train, and we're happy to meet you and get on the mat and learn a little bit from you, and maybe you'll learn a little bit from us. That's a good time. We do have episode 100. So Gary, this is episode 95. How many away is episode 100?
So that would be 96, 97, 98, 99, 100. 13.
13 episodes away. It's right around the corner, Gary.
Yeah.
Roughly
right
5 weeks by this count. But what we're going to do for episode 100 is we'd like you to be on the show. So the easiest way would be to take your cell phone, go in a quiet spot, and answer this question. What has BJJ done for you? And give it about 5 minutes of an answer. If it's shorter, that's fine. And if it's a little longer, that's fine as well. But don't submit a 20-minute answer to that, because I'm trying to get a good amount of these.
Possible.
Yeah, it should be like a little commercial for jiu-jitsu that you could share with your friends and say, here's these people that all do jiu-jitsu like me. I'm on here, and we're all sharing what it's done for us off the mat and how it's helped us. And I think it'll be a really fun way to celebrate our 100th episode. So once you get that audio clip, either record it with your phone or that's probably the easiest way, send it to bjjbrick@gmail.com. Put in the subject line on your email, episode 100, and that should make it easier for me to organize those. If you can't somehow do that, email me and let me know that you want to share a story, and I'll get back with you, and we'll figure something out.
Sounds perfect. We can't wait for that episode.
Gary, we're at the time of the show where we've already talked about my audiobook, and that's a great way to support our podcast, but people also want to know about your audiobook and what you've got in the works. So what
do I have coming in the works, Byron, since you're my manager?
You never seem to know what's coming right, around the next week or so. But this week, you've been working hard on this audiobook called How to Defend a Scary Clown Attack, Lessons Learned from the Second Grade.
Well, these are actually pretty easy. I can't say I necessarily learned it in second grade, but most clowns, statistics show most clowns do attack in second grade. So statistics do show that. And as you guys know, statistics are always right. But the cool thing about clowns, Byron, let me just ask you this. What do clowns wear on their feet?
Big shoes.
Big shoes tells you what?
That they have to buy large shoes.
No, Byron. Big shoes tells me to pull guard, go to X guard, sweep, lace a leg to the heel hook. That's all I'm going to say. Game over. You have a crippled clown.
Gary has been heel hooking clowns since the second grade.
Since the second grade, my friends.
So all this and even more in Gary's audiobook, which will be coming out very soon, we hope.
Yes, so definitely learn how to cripple a clown.
That sounds terrible. How to make a happy clown a sad clown.
How to turn the happy frown upside down. Happy clown, smile, frown.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to get us kicked off air with the crippling clowns.
Not actually recommended, but if they're attacking, you got to deal with it, man.
Yeah, yep. Big shoes lead to heel hooks.
I'd also say don't flunk the second grade, because if they're only attacking second graders, get in and out of there as quick as possible with that.
You only want to spend 365 days in the second grade.
There we go. Good advice from Gary, and we are looking forward to that audiobook. Okay.
As always, we really appreciate you tuning in this week and sharing some good times with us. And tune in next week. Like we said, next 2 weeks we have strength and conditioning question and answer with Sam Spiegelman. So don't miss it.
Yep, and don't forget to stay sweaty, my friends.
And always shower.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.